This is the Tech Alley. I'm Tabiso.
How's it, Sponga here? Dogman Lizards, Tech Boy. How are you?
That's a new
You
one.
see, I keep trying. I keep getting in this game,
From
man.
now on, you're
Eh?
all allowed to call Bonga the Tech Boy.
Well, don't call me when you see him in the streets, though. So
Please call him in the streets. That would
for
make my
it's
day.
it's just for the podcast. It's
If
just
you
for
see
the
Bonga and
podcast.
I out together, please call him Tech Boy.
No, no, no. I will ignore you. I will not respond to you. Please don't do that to yourselves.
How was the weekend?
Oh
Heard you went
man.
hiking.
So I spent the majority of it Friday and Saturday. I didn't really do much, but on Sunday I allowed a friend to convince me that I should do hiking. It was my first time hiking, and I think almost practically everything that could have gone wrong nearly did. For starters, I went hiking wearing the wrong shoes. I was wearing my Adidas Superstars, which proved to be painful because at some point those sneakers tore. Not completely, but a part of it is there's like a hole. We hiked for 13 kilometers,
So Bonga did
which was around about
exercise
three and a
on
half
exercise
hours of walking.
shoes.
Yep. 3.5 hours of walking. I was burnt. I didn't have sunscreen on. I was late. We were nearly late for the hike. I could barely walk after that hike. My toes were in pain because the trail is full of rocks.
Rocks.
Literally scaled up Makalis to the top of the hill. Then you have to scale down back again. Which you think that walking downhill is easy, but not when the inclination is looking like it's almost 45 degrees downwards. So it was not. It was okay. Actually, I want to do it again. I think that it's reignited my interest in exercising. I did start it last year, but then I had to stop it because of school. I was very busy, so I think that I'm gonna go back probably next week. I'm gonna go so you're gonna be hearing me saying that I've gym. So I came back. My plan was to sleep, but unfortunately I was hit by load shedding on the Sunday afternoon. So I went out a little, came back around about 8, 9ish, and then I passed out. And you? How was your weekend?
No, my weekend was okay, man. I spent it supporting the wife. They've got an NPO running, which supports underprivileged young women.
Is it?
So a lot of work that's being done there. So yeah, stressful. Did a lot of work, but I mean, yeah, that's the first time I've done that in a while. So always nice to give back. Then more school, of course. So that's
Yeah, you
That's a
signed
killer.
up. You signed up for that one, didn't you?
That's a killer. So yeah, no, trying to survive the year. If I can get to November, I'll be very, very happy. So tell us about Samsung
Oh yeah.
and the flip
So
phones.
let's start the week. Let's start the week. So as you all know, last week Samsung announced 3 new flagship phones. It was not 3, 4. It was the Z Flip.
Yes.
It was the S20. It was the S20 Plus, touted as 5G, and then it was the S20 Ultra.
Ultra.
Obviously. So, I think that some of you may have been following our Twitter account would have seen that the account was actively posting information about the devices as the announcements were being made. Personally, just looking at it at the event post what happened, I don't know. Did you watch the
I
event?
saw highlights.
You saw highlights.
Unfortunately, I was still in back-to-back meetings, and then I had to go to class, so I didn't see much of it. But I did see the highlights.
So I watched most of the posting, right, of the show, and what I noticed was that there wasn't really much of enthusiasm
Yeah,
on
yeah.
it as opposed to what you'd find like for
At an
Apple.
event or a Google
People were
event.
missing opportunities to clap when the speaker was expecting a clap. There were not too many of those claps to begin with on the show. I mean, on during the thing, and some of the features that were being announced didn't seem to wow a lot of people. Actually, at some point, one of the announcers actually asked that people clap. I forgot who it is, but I specifically remember that moment. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know whether are people bored or are they just plugged in to the
Do you get
conversation.
the feeling that Samsung only does these events to match Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple? They don't. It doesn't necessarily look like it's within the ethos and company culture for them to have this fanciful big time stuff. I mean, even when they go to CES and stuff like that, they just put things out, but you never see like big presentations from the Samsung dudes even at CES.
I think that they certainly don't put much effort in making it known. I mean, or at least it was the first time this year that they actually did it, because in all of the years of when Samsungs were being announced,
release.
you just, yeah, press release, and you found out about it and read about it in the news, and then, okay, there's a new device. But this time around, there was a whole Twitter campaign that I saw. I know that there was an entire event with MCs and everything somewhere around Joburg. I don't actually know where it was. It was announced pretty early, so everyone could get the time to actually watch the announcement. And I think that was a new thing for them, or at least in my experience. So I think that it's, I don't know. I don't think that it's with them. I don't think that it's in them. I don't think that
like it's a part of their culture.
yeah, just no one really had the emphasis on being excited about these new devices.
And I guess these are these four devices, and perhaps the Note would be the flagship high-end phones that Samsung would produce.
There was no announcement of the Note or the Fold. In fact, newer generations of those.
Exactly, and I mean those would be their entry into the luxury segment of the market. But Samsung is a volume seller. They make a lot of phones in the lower ends, and they sell the most phones. They make the most phones. They ship the most phones during the course of the year, and they just announce phones and move on. They don't necessarily hype up a lot. I even saw that you're able to pre-order the new S20s together with the flip phone. I didn't see the release date of when the phone will actually.
It's the, or I don't know about shipping to SA, but apparently I actually have a friend who had signed up, or has actually bought
Signed up for the pre-order.
Signed up for the pre-order for the S20 Ultra, and it was through one of the local cell phone providers that apparently had promised that they will get it much earlier than the announced 6th of March.
Okay.
But subsequently, he got a message telling them that, oops, sorry, actually, you're also going to get it on the 6th, you're going to get it on the 6th of March once the worldwide release happens.
So the real ride release is on the 6th of March.
Yeah, but then what I'm not sure on is, will SA also get it on the 6th of March? If it releases on the US on the 6th of March, does it mean that we're also going to get it at the same time?
And I mean, I don't know the supply chain of Samsung that well, but the impact of the coronavirus in terms of being able to make sure that the phone gets made, components get shipped, was the 6th of March still feasible? Probably for the first batch is already done, but I mean, if that one sells out,
subsequent
orders beyond that, because these phones tend to be very popular.
Yeah, true, and it tends to be very popular amongst the early adopters with the money to be able to keep up with
Galaxy phones since
the sales.
There's fours,
indeed,
Galaxy Notes. So these guys, those are the type of people that would. It's the same as in the iPhone world, where you've had since the 3G, you'll have the 4S, and so on and so forth.
So I don't know. I think that I think personally, the early capacity will probably be serviced, but I'm assuming that, given that their biggest markets usually would be Asia, Europe, and the US, the large stock will go to those ones
to make sure that they meet
Africa then gets whatever crumbles that remain after that, and then further subsequent to that, fulfilling orders that come after there will probably prove to be quite difficult, given what is going on. I mean, the coronavirus is now surpassed every other known epidemic to exist. It surpassed SARS. It surpassed what is it, MSM or MSA? There's some M something, but there's the other second big one. So obviously that has an impact on human capacity and output for these tech companies to be able to deliver on these devices. So we don't know until they actually hit the market. I personally don't think that the availability is going to be that high. It's going to be quite a tricky thing for it to happen, but we'll see. I don't think that it's not going to be. I don't think that it's going to be like something that's going to be available in our hands that quickly. But another thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that it was quite dope to see that they actually shot the entire show using the S20 Ultra.
So if you were watching it on YouTube,
Yeah.
you would have been watching it behind the camera of an S20.
It was a camera of it was
that was
camera
very
of
good quality.
yeah, it was a camera of an S20, and it was streaming quite well. I think
Yeah.
it was a 1080p. For those who have had 4K TVs, it should have been showing at 4K
so
as well.
I was going to say, if you've got 1080p, it's your latest TVs are showing 1080p.
It
So
would have been showing. It would have been
That's-
showing
that's very
1080p.
good quality.
I don't think that the full specs of these phones is pretty much has been widely reviewed and explained. So I don't necessarily want to bore you with the sort of details of what each phone entails. I just want to speak about some of the things that really caught my attention with these phones. That I think that it's of importance.
Tell us
Especially-
about because I think what's interesting for our customers or our listeners, sorry, is the physical hardware and how the phone works. The dual screens on the flip, the outside screen, and then you
Yeah.
open it, there's another inside screen.
So
I've
So
heard there's some influencers who've complained about the flip breaking.
So, here's what happened, right? So let's just talk about the phones in general. Then we're gonna get to the flip because I think that's a different conversation. That's not a different conversation, but it's an extension of this conversation. So we already know that the S20 and the S20 Ultra have like 4 cameras in the back. They have a nice sleek design. They have a camera bezel. The S20 Ultra has a battery life almost 1,000 amps bigger than the 11 Pro Max, so you can expect quite a long battery life. Overall, in general, all these phones have been made to be bigger with a bigger screen size, and they have much more power than their predecessors. It's also interesting to note that they've gone from having an S2, S3, S4, S5, S6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then from there they jump straight to 20. So I would expect to be an S11, but I guess they're following the Huawei route of having it in 10-digit forms,
I mean,
so
it
to
doesn't
say.
sound right to say S11.
Why not?
S13. Come on. How do you market S13?
Yeah, how do you market it the same way you market an S20?
No, 20 just sounds nicer. It's easier to market. It's easier to sell. Okay, but what else is interesting on the? So,
The-
4 cameras.
Yeah, four
Does
cameras.
anybody on the market have 5?
I actually don't know. I don't think so. No, I haven't seen.
I mean,
I don't really follow
That's
much.
probably coming this year, right?
Probably,
Because now
but
we've got 4, then there'll be 5.
overall, the biggest takeaway from me with these new phones is that it's how the focus on cameras is now becoming really quite a huge thing.
And video.
We've literally got into a world where a phone now is actually a camera that can just make calls and have apps on it. That's essentially what it is now. Even with the new iPhone release, the biggest factor of why we're going to buy the next iPhone, apart from 5G, which is dependent on a whole lot of things,
My ability to create my own content.
and editing that content, and how much size do I have the battery life whilst I'm creating the content. And so we are on that stage now, and I think that's another a big takeaway with these new phones. I mean, we now know that the S20 Ultra you can zoom in at 100 times. That's the max, because of a bent lens inside the phone that can take light, augment that using the cameras on the phone, and then over and above that, enable the zoom on the device. So that's one of the great things. And also, there was a huge focus on AI
Yes.
in
everybody's-
usage of cameras. So one might actually ask themselves, how is AI involved in the use of cameras? One of the best ways of doing it is by teaching the system of the phone, how movement in pictures works, and then you through that be able to guess where you would be in the picture if you were in motion. And so that is quite a big takeaway to say one would never thought that you would have AI being part of the selling point of why you have camera of your camera on the phone. And also another thing that it's a big feature is the one touch or the one photo feature.
Oh,
Did you hear
yes.
about it?
Yes. Tell us more.
So the one photo feature is, you know how when you in the spur of the moment, maybe you're shooting a video or you're taking a picture of a specific moment that you have to quickly take a picture, but you realize after that the picture that you took doesn't necessarily capture the moment as beautifully as you'd like it,
As you'd want
as
it.
you'd wanted it. So what Samsung has built is a one one picture moment that actually uses AI to augment the entire moment. So you take a video, then from that video it creates multiple photos that capture the best moment as best as it can. So in portrait, landscape, wide camera, all of those features are basically used to it'll through AI create a different all the views that will be the best to view to check that image, and then present it to you, and then you pick the final one that you want. I think that's quite a great thing, because we've all seen moments or came across moments where we would like to take a picture of something but realize after that actually the angle that we took wasn't correct. So
The quality wasn't
that really is going to rein people in. I think that it's as a person who's not a pro Android, I would like to see that feature in an iPhone some point soon. I know that I'm probably asking for too much. Maybe it won't happen with this iPhone, but I'm sure Apple would eventually get on it at some point. I think. So it's that, and obviously there's a huge focus on 5G. There was a huge starting that all of these phones are going to be on 5G. They will work once it comes into place. I don't think that's really a big thing that is applicable to us in SA at the moment, because even though we know that there are certain providers are working towards 5G availability, its actual implementation is not necessarily as that imminent. I didn't see the 5G coming through in SA, and at least in the last quarter of the year where it was working fully. And that's also just me being optimistic. I don't know what you think.
No. I think 5G is going to take a while, not only to roll out or be implemented, but also to be the place where we or the network where we regularly use or utilize the internet from. I think the same way in which it took a while for LTE to be common or to be the common base from a network perspective, the same will happen with 5G. I think, the added complication of the political nightmare between China, the US, the EU, is also causing some sort of slowdown in the rollout of 5G. And I mean, we all know there are like 3 or 4 players that can build the network infrastructure to support 5G. Once you have that type of oligopoly out there, it becomes very difficult, because then countries want to own, countries want to be at the forefront, countries want to be in charge.
And obviously,
us as consumers just want to use.
And there's a huge GDP revenue as well in being
Absolutely.
first into the market with that.
I mean, I think I saw in the Financial Times they spoke about the possibility that it could add $5 trillion to China's GDP if China were to fully be first in terms of fully rolling out 5G.
4G added about 4 trillion, or was it 4 billion to the US economy when it came out.
Yeah. And
So
then
you can already see the benefits of
to
that.
add 5 trillion to China. Now, this is where the political complications come in so nicely. If it adds 5 trillion to China, it would take it close to, if not past, the US GDP, and it would make it number 1 in the world.
Which is what Trump definitely does not want.
That's why you get so much of the fact that the US is trying to block China's involvement, with good reasons and bad reasons.
Indeed.
So yeah, it's going to be quite interesting to see. I'm glad that phones with 5G capability are starting to come out, because you don't want to be in a situation where we've got 5G network but no devices.
But then, as a South African, do you think that a phone having 5G right now would be your purchasing factor? Like
Not as a South African. Not
would a
as a South
phone, yeah,
African. I mean, again, you may live in South Africa, but a lot of us live in a different South Africa to
the rest of
the
the
rest
country?
of the country.
True.
And I mean, we've got a certain network provider who's been touting the fact that they've got almost full coverage in a specific area of the city of Johannesburg from a 5G perspective. So if you are lucky enough to be covered by that, you've got 5G capability, so to speak, already. And this company's been talking about it for the last 3 to 4 months already. So
And
again,
we still, even now, there are still towns where LTE is a dream.
Exactly.
I mean,
So-
my hometown, I can tell you for a fact, my hometown does not have LTE. The highest that I have is 3G.
as far as I remember, both Vodacom and MTN are only now reaching 100% coverage or close to, if it's late 90s, from a 3G perspective. So again, that tells you we're already moving on to 5G. And
Chinese
we're-
Chinese already working on 6G, by the way.
Exactly. And only now are we getting to late 90s coverage for 3G. So that means, what would the cell phone providers also do from a spend perspective? Would they continue to keep rolling out 4G, or would they simply, feel that they've got 3G as a backup where there's no 4G, and start building out or rolling out the 5G network?
And also, you then include fiber, which is also a spend,
Yes.
but which is not available everywhere and anywhere. We still have areas right now where there's still quite a struggle with fiber rollouts.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have areas in Gauteng still that don't have fiber as we speak.
Absolutely, and I mean, an interesting segue is the fact that we last week there was a speech where a certain president spoke about the fact that spectrum would be made available to the network operators for them to be able to do this type of stuff, and they spoke about the fact that they require that spectrum sale to happen so that they can roll out 4G, 5G in a more cost-effective manner for their companies and for us as consumers.
Okay, but anyway, so now you asked me about flip phones. Now here's where the interesting part comes in. So the Z Flip, right, was announced almost as a segue as I used it from the previous Galaxy Fold.
Yep.
The Z Flip almost looks like the Motorola Razr, which was announced towards the end of last year.
Yeah.
It's just as thin body that you can flip in and out. You can take selfies on the front camera when it's folded in. You can flip it to expand the view, and also you can actually put the phone in a 90-degree angle, where on the one half of the phone you're taking a picture, on the other half of the phone you are editing the picture in real time.
Yeah.
Right, so they're touting that as a mini station, so to say. And in fact, the Galaxy Fold, the first iteration of the Galaxy Fold was built with in mind that in the future you won't need to be in the office to do your work. By that it means that your phone becomes your laptop, so to say, for you to be able to view mails, reply to your emails, do your work anywhere in the world, so long as you're connected to your corporate network.
Yep.
And you have internet connectivity to be able to communicate. That's really the idea behind it. And so it relies on material that can bend on the device, which then is now the story of flip phones exist, and do people actually have a use case for them, or are those use cases being implied on the consumer to actually like it? That's the first thing.
I think that's a very interesting discussion, especially when we look at where the world of work is going. So, I mean, today in 2020, we still work in office parks and office buildings. If you work for a medium to large enterprise, you're mostly in an office.
Or
doing
expected
work.
to be in the office even when you have no work to do.
That's a fair comment. Fair comment. But in the future, would you still be required in the office? Would you still be required to get up and drive somewhere to get to a particular meeting point or to a particular building? The one thing that still remains true is you will need to be able to conduct your work, whatever your work may be. And the most common device used today is either some sort of laptop, tablet, or phone. And so if you're able to combine those particular devices into a single device, which is what the Galaxy Fold is trying to do in terms of be a tablet when open and a phone when closed, and the flip phone the same, where you can do 2 or 3 things on 2 or 3 different screens at the same time on the same phone. It could be something that's very advantageous in the future of work, where you can be using these devices in the comfort of your own home. I mean, imagine people walking outside to sit in the park, lay against the tree, and respond to emails or
Hey,
build code.
you're laying against the tree. The next thing, chief, bring that phone. There goes your
Well,
work.
after all, in South Africa, so you always have that risk. Very, very, very true. Very true.
So that is really the biggest takeaway for me with regards to the flip. But obviously, that sounds all good and nice in terms of the use cases of it, and I think that they really do have a market that exists, I guess. But I'm just not one of those people that would utilize a flip phone. Not necessarily because I just don't think that it fits my personality and then what are we doing with the phone. And then another thing that is proving to be quite complicated about flip phones is the actual physical hardware.
Yes.
And how it's done. So you remember last year that the Galaxy Fold actually started seeing flames after like 14 hours of use, because the screen was made on it was made on plastic. The front end is made on plastic,
And you were not supposed to take off that plastic film.
the plastic film,
but they
because
didn't
that
tell you.
is the actual screen that you're taking off.
Yes.
And people started taking off because you know how you see it whenever you get on your phone and there's a screen. So there's a plastic coverage. You're thinking that's just the plastic that I have to remove to get to the class, whereas you're actually removing the screen of the phone. And then they also did a test on the Motorola Razr, which after 27,000 flips, it started not flipping correctly. And the stats are that in America, an average American checks their phone around 80 times a day. So that means that if you flip your phone 80 times a day, and the phone breaks at 27,000 number of flips, that is around about 330 days. So it's less than a year of the phone actually leading to break. Now the flip is the same questions are coming up about the flip, that if a Razr can break it about 27,000, when will the Z Flip break? There's a tool that is used to actually test how many times you can fold the device. I couldn't really get the stats on when the flip breaks, but it seems like it doesn't get to 100,000 as well.
Sure.
So it now begs the question.
And 100,000 would get you to about 4 or 5 years of use.
More or less.
Okay.
So then the question is, folds are good and from a certain use case point of view, but are they practical right now?
That's a very interesting question. I just just as a side comment, who the hell opens their phone 80 times a day?
Well, if you check your phone a couple of times in a day, I think I would possibly open my phone 80 times a day, because it's mostly in my hand for quite a while. So it's possible. But then again, I guess this is only based on the US.
Yes.
And
No, of course.
we're talking a population of about 300 million people. So it could be a different use case in SA, for example. But that's a good parameter to think about.
It would be a very good parameter.
But yeah, so I think the rest of the stats on the phone are stats that you can check if you are a listener and you actually are looking for more information about how each of these phones are performing. You can check on our Instagram page. There is on one of our posts, there's actually a pictorial specifications of how these phones are spec'd up. and you can just trust that they are obviously they get pricier as the specs get higher. Camera quality is better than the predecessor. It's really the best thing out there in the market at the moment until Apple releases again. Just joking. So yeah, you can check with that, and we can provide you with more information about any other specs that you want to know about the devices.
All right.
So moving on, you sir have something that you're quite interested in, and I see you really speak about it quite a lot: climate change. So what's up with that?
Man. So, at the beginning of every year, the most powerful people in the world all get on big, fuel guzzling private jets or commercial jetliners and land in a little Swiss town called Davos. They then get in big limousines and drive around the city, meeting each other for 4 days, talking about how to save the world from the effects of climate change. Now, recently, the CEO of BP, Bob Dudley, stood down after a decade in charge. He spent much of his time fighting the effects of Deepwater Horizon. So most of you that have watched the movie know what happened at a BP oil rig back in 2010.
When it exploded in the sea,
When it
and then
exploded in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh yeah, I remember the story. That was a
They've
huge
paid
thing. That was a
billions.
huge
They're
thing. Yeah, still paying
paying
repercussions for that.
for that incident. And the new CEO, a man called Bernard Looney, took over at the beginning of this month. Bob Dudley, towards the end of his tenure, was asked a lot about what BP is doing as one of the biggest emitters of carbon emissions in the world, what BP is doing to fight off these effects of carbon emissions. And Bob Dudley quite simply said, you guys are going to be reliant on oil for the next 50 to 100 years. So just live with it. And, us as BP are doing good by providing all of this energy. And we don't necessarily have to do a lot from a climate change perspective, because we are doing our piece in society by creating all of this energy for you by picking up oil from the ground. Now that's a leader.
Indeed.
The new CEO, Bernard Looney, has flipped that completely around. He's taken over, and one of the first things that he said is that he wants BP to be carbon neutral by 2050. Now, 2050 is 30 years away. I've been on this planet for 32 years already. So, by the time I reach 60, BP wants to be carbon neutral. So they must be emitting zero extra carbon into the atmosphere, or the carbon footprint.
So that sounds like it's wordplay.
Yes.
That we need to be careful about.
Yes.
So does it mean that they will not be emitting carbon?
No.
It means that they will still be emitting
It's
carbon,
actually,
but not extra carbon than what they currently are right now.
So it's actually an impossibility for BP to not emit carbon into the atmosphere. As an oil producer, as an oil refiner, and as an oil or gasoline distributor through their BP garages, they do it all. That whole value chain has a large carbon footprint. They also produce or mine gas, and a lot of European homes run on gas. So they are a massive emitter of carbon. Now, I was just thinking about how they would do this. So obviously, the big oil majors have been thinking about how to get to renewable energy. So BP has also started building wind energy stations. So by producing energy through wind, it actually acts as a minus on their current carbon footprint. So you add 10 by producing oil, but you say -2 by producing wind. The other way they could do it is by planting trees, and that would also then neutralize the effect that you have. And what I decided to do was to go have a look at what technology companies have said, because little do you know, but technology companies are amongst the largest carbon emission perpetrators in the whole entire world. So if you think about the devices that Apple, Microsoft, Google, even Facebook to a large extent, Amazon, all of the things that they make, deliver.
So those factories that they
all the
utilize to
factories that
build
they
this.
have. Amazon has millions of cars. They ship through Amazon Freight, through trucks, and they even have planes these
Do
days.
data centers and
Yes,
cloud
yeah,
and
absolutely.
cloud centers
Because
actually
they
emit
yes,
those?
because they use energy driven by their big servers, and those servers use large amounts of energy, and that energy is produced obviously via electricity of some sort. And what these companies have also said is that they would like to also be carbon neutral.
But then what is their part? Because I know that there are a couple of companies that are partnering with the oil industry, right? You
Yes.
have, in particular, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are working with oil companies to apparently make the world cleaner.
Yes.
First of all, do you trust it? Number two, how are they doing it?
So again, they will never not emit carbons because of the products that they make. What they are saying is that we will still produce a lot of carbon. Our carbon footprint will still be large, but what we will do is we will do other stuff to neutralize. So it will be like a plus and a minus, which gives us a net of zero.
Which means that we can produce more so long as we're doing more to have a net
Yes.
effect on what
so,
we're doing.
So that's effectively what they're saying.
That's
Microsoft have-
that's like being a culprit in your own and your own regulator at the
Yep,
same time.
Exactly, judge, jury, execution.
Yeah.
It's like playing a game of football and drawing 1-1.
Every time.
We both scored, but none of us lost, none of us won.
Or maybe not even draw 1-1. It's more like playing a game of football and starting with a 1-1 but ending at a 10-10.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
the
it's
net
a
effect is still the
high-scored
same.
draw. Yes, it's a high score.
The net effect is still the same. You are producing more, you're doing more at the same time
Yes.
to do a net effect, but you're still doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I find worrying, I guess, is the perception that has been driven as if they are doing something to make the world cleaner by working towards this. But it's just for me it feels like they're actually finding much more tech innovative ways of doing what they're doing right now. So for example, if you have Google, just talking about Google and the amount of information that it has already on its bank about different things like geology, seismology, nature, all of the information is a huge resource of pool that, and in the hands of an oil company will be quite a great thing, because then it'll help them be able to find new sources of oil much more faster than they currently are doing.
Yes.
And also in a world like in America, where fracking is also a huge thing, you also having them not only be able to find oil faster, but also be able to find natural gas faster by cracking the land.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And so then it makes you wonder, when they're partnering, are they really partnering for good, or are they really partnering for a masquerade of good,
Yes.
but they're actually just trying to boost their revenues because they need to keep growing as businesses?
There's definitely an element of trying to keep their revenues growing as growing businesses. I mean, these guys year on year are always knocking out double-digit increases. I mean, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've seen Google's results knocked out the park. We've seen Amazon's results knocked out the park, especially in the cloud computing space, which uses large amounts of data centers. And they've promised to run those data centers on renewable energy by 2030. Microsoft has also got a massive cloud computing business. And what Microsoft have said is that they hope to be carbon negative by 2030, which is in 10 years' time. And they hope by 2050 to have also sequestrated enough carbon to account for all of the direct emissions the company has ever made. So if you think about Microsoft having been founded in the late 70s and emitting so much metric tons of carbon or CO2 into the air, I mean, this is how scary some of these numbers are, and you cannot even understand or measure them. Microsoft expects to generate 16 million metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2020, including from indirect emissions from activities like corporate travel. Like I said, these companies have massive fleets of private jets to
which
help these guys
which is
fly
kind of
around.
which is kind of contradictory given the humanitarian work that Bill Gates is currently
Right?
is
And
currently
who's the
doing.
largest single shareholder in Microsoft?
Exactly. So on the one hand, the one company that is making your income is quite participant
Yes.
in world pollution, but on the one hand, you're doing anything and everything in your power to try and create sustainability, a cleaner earth,
lea-
and it's
At least
yeah.
he's using the profits that he's gaining from the company to help fight Ebola in Africa, to help fight malaria in Africa. He's
New ways of
building-
flushing the
he's
toilet.
building those new toilets. At least he's doing something. But I mean, again, the climate change discussion is one of the biggest in the world. Apple have said they hope to also be clean in the next 10 to 20 years. They claim in one of their annual reports from last year that they are down 64% in terms of carbon emissions since 2011, and they've prevented 2.8 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere. So they are starting to put this in their annual reports, in their financial statements, which we as shareholders read, and people our age are very and even younger are very interested in
Interested.
how these companies do this.
But then
So
you-
Greta Thunberg, for example, and everybody knows Greta Thunberg for fighting with Donald Trump around climate change. She walks the talk. She went to Davos from
On
her
a
home
boat.
country on a carbon neutral boat. She didn't fly. She didn't go in a car.
In the
She
world
sailed.
of in the world of big economics, I don't see her idea being scalable.
Yes.
But I
Well, probably not in our lifetime, but I mean, she is 15 and has, by God's grace, another 100 or 150 years to live, and pull out some of these things.
well, I think I should definitely keep that in mind, or we'll follow that closely on, because I think that it's really going to be one of the huge things to focus on. I mean, now that there's a huge drive on the bottom line, which is one of those things on profits. It's on climate change, and also on giving back to the community. So it's really one of those, even if you are a person who's starting a business or exploring a business, something, even in SA, your business must take into account those things about climate
So you have to look
climate
after your
change.
shareholders, your community, and the environment.
And do we know what local SA based companies are actually doing to reduce the
Absolutely.
carbon footprint? I haven't really done any research about it, so I'm not gonna lie. But maybe if you have any information on that.
So we've seen Sasol in their recent AGM be asked about what their plans are to scale back from their carbon emissions, and they've also started saying that their CEOs and the executive committee's remuneration will be structured in such a way that it measures how they are implementing
Solutions for that.
these solutions. We've also seen that some of the biggest lenders in the country have come out to announce that they will no longer invest in new coal projects. Obviously, they can't divest from current coal projects, and coal, of course, is one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide as well. So we've seen that companies are starting to take a notice of this thing. Eskom has tried its best to get the
IPP
independent
is running.
power producers program running, and one of the main things of that is to bring sustainable renewable energy online, such as wind and solar. And so companies are doing it, but like you see with big tech, like you see with BP, they want to see how they're going to roll this stuff out. So what do those solutions look like, especially in South Africa, where most of our energy production is through coal. I mean, coal is more than 80% of the power that or energy that we create in this country.
I guess perhaps in the same context, all these companies that are focusing on digital and mobile solutions are contributing towards
Absolutely.
climate change by trying to
Absolutely.
find easier ways of doing things electronically or through devices,
Yes.
as opposed to having a form or paper-based solutions. So it should be a thing that should really may have a mass effect into the
And
future.
I mean, I would hope that, in Minister Mantashe's speech at the Mining Indaba a couple of weeks ago, where he spoke about allowing big miners to generate their own power for their mines, that announcement came with the caveat that as long as it's renewable and as long as it's sustainable energy. And the same for President Ramaphosa, who announced that municipalities, in good standing, by the way, which there are very few of, would also be allowed to generate their own power over and above what ESCOM provides. And again, it must come with that caveat that it must be renewable and sustainable.
Yeah, well, with that yet remains to be seen. I mean, speaking of government, it's quite a tricky thing because we're living in a world where the talking 4IR contributes to renewable energies, but they're still asking people to complete forms that are paper based.
Yes.
But in any case, that's a different thing. So I think we've covered quite a lot there. So now let's come back. You, Mister, have your tech win of the week. What is that?
My tech winner of the week is this is a very funny one. Don't laugh, guys, when you listen to this. It is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Boris Johnson. Now, why is my tech
Why
winner
on
of
earth
the
would you
week
choose Boris
Mr.
Johnson?
Boris Johnson? So, Boris Johnson last week announced that Huawei would be playing a role in the building and rolling out of the United Kingdom's 5G network infrastructure. Now, why that would be a problem, you would ask, is because if you remember, the United States in 2018 banned Huawei for the most part in selling, acquiring, distributing anything in the United States, and they fully expected that their allies would follow suit. Now, the UK for the last 100 years has been the United States' biggest and best ally, and there's been even reports that President Trump and Prime Minister Johnson were on the phone last week,
And they were shouting at him. Yeah.
President Trump was heard shouting
Yeah,
at
I
Prime
heard
Minister
that.
Johnson,
I heard that.
and in actual fact, he was so angry with Prime Minister Johnson that he slammed the phone down on him. That's very presidential.
Well, very childish, but yeah.
So, for me, it definitely would make Johnson my winner, Prime Minister Johnson my take winner of the week. One, because he's allowed Huawei in, because Huawei is the biggest and best company to roll out your 5G network infrastructure. And two, because he went against what good old Donald was saying. Now, he even went further. He was supposed to be visiting the US and visiting the White House to go see his friend Donald Trump very soon. And this was expected to take place in April, May, which is the traditional European spring, and it's the traditional time that the UK Prime Minister travels to visit all of his allies. He has now delayed his visit to Washington to go visit President Trump because President Trump dropped the phone. So that's my take of the week.
Oh yeah, well, I guess I don't really think they've been friends. If you think about the incident where Johnson, Macron, and Trudeau were laughing at Trump because of his hair and whatever, that was like what, last year or I don't recall. So yeah, we'll see if that is
the week.
I don't really have one. I guess I'll say Samsung. Is my they really came out with some great quality.
To do a show.
No, Samsung really won. I think they are, despite some of the things that I've said about the show overall, didn't really give me much enthusiasm. But the devices, the camera, if it just wasn't Android, I'd probably consider getting it. But I'm not really a huge Samsung person or Android person altogether. So Samsung really has led the market, and I think their investment in flip phones is really probably going to prove to be beneficial to them in the long run. We just have to wait and see on what happens.
Cool.
My tech loser though, BlackBerry. So I think you would have read, or at least for those of you who don't know, BlackBerry, which is now owned by a company called TCL Communication, has announced, and in fact, TCL has announced that they have no desire to build any new BlackBerry device going forward. So, what has happened is that um, BlackBerry did try to make a comeback. They released a device at some point towards the end of 2018, 2019, but the sales kind of like slumped. And the device was still based on a keyboard, so they were still sticking to the traditional idea of doing that. But essentially, it did not work out pretty well, so they've decided that to can it. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of BlackBerry. TCL as a company actually is releasing a device.
Oh wow.
They're releasing a phone, and guess what? It takes the idea of a flip phone and puts it in a different way. So you know how you have an iPhone that is in your hand right now that you can utilize in its basic form. The TCL can actually extend the area of the screen, much like how if you're opening a cupboard from a table, it expands the area size of the cupboard. So the TCL is going to work in the same way. Apparently, there are still the leaks of that device just came out about 3 hours ago, as from the time of this recording, and so we'll wait to see. I guess TCL is taking on the knowledge and then is coming out as a player under its own brand, as opposed to going the BlackBerry brand because it has been affected, or its notoriety has gone down the drain, if I put it that.
Yes.
So now BlackBerry is actually focusing on security. That's where they're based, and that's where their rise actually started from. So they now do corporate security for emails for companies, corporate infrastructure for security as well. That's where the focus is going to be. So that's the sad part for me. Bye BlackBerry.
Oh, that's very sad.
It
There
is
was a time
indeed.
when we all used to have a BlackBerry.
Yep.
All
You
right.
have any?
Yeah. The South African Post Office is my loser of the week.
Why?
So the South African Post Office has announced that they are coming out with an e-commerce platform in March 2020. Today is the 17th of February, if I'm not mistaken.
It
so
is,
that gives
yes.
them plus minus, with the leap year day included, 13 days to show us what this e-commerce platform will look like. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen anything. I haven't heard of a pilot being run with consumers or staff. I haven't seen anybody say that they would fulfill orders on behalf of this e-commerce platform. Where would we be buying from? Who would you be able to sell on it? Would it be for the export market like Alibaba, where South Africans shop on AliExpress and they can shop from various vendors? What exactly will it do? You can announce anything, but you need customers, and those customers are small businesses in South Africa as well as us retail consumers. So, unfortunately, once again, the post office has shot itself in the foot, and I am very concerned that this e-commerce platform, which doesn't even have a name, will probably be dead on arrival.
Well, what's new? I don't even think that I have much to say to that, because we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think that. Well, I think between the two of us, it's safe to say that whatever that is, that date will not be met.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that anything is going to happen, or if it does, it's going to be a commercialization of a prototype as opposed to the end product that is customers are going to like, that actually works.
Yep.
So I don't really think much about it. And-
So, in closing, Mr.
So,
Tech Boy, there was an incident,
There was an
on the
incident.
socials today.
There was an incident earlier today, Chief,
and you
that
now
was-
want to give us the tech tip of the week, which will help
Yeah. So there's
fellow
a
young queens
there's
and
a
fellow
there's
young
a there's
kings
a there's a
how
young
to protect
there's a young gentleman
stuff from
who saw his life
misappropriated.
who saw his life today. What happened was that apparently his partner got access to his Instagram through the web interface, in fact, and started taking screenshots and posting them onto his account as a post on his timeline. And it seems like how she managed to get access to his account was that he gave her his email address and his password, and she utilized that to get in. So it could have been either, or and then once she got into his social media, she actually, or would have managed to lock him out for some time to post that, and so he couldn't get into his account. He couldn't delete those posts because subsequently now those posts have been deleted. So you can't really see them anymore. But it was exposing his conversations with multiple women, flirting. One of them, he was downright denying that he's in a relationship altogether. So sparked a huge conversation on Twitter, specifically about going through a partner's phone, whether you want to do it, the tips and tricks of how people actually do it, how they find information. They search for keywords in conversations. They try and send pictures to themselves so they can see who is the most frequently chatted to person, and it was quite mind-opening, eye-boggling. So it eventually led me to actually think about how can I protect my own device from such things. Not because I'm doing anything sinister, but I think that everyone wants to protect the information, because once a person gets access to your phone, it is not only just your social media where they can go to. Yes. They can go to your banking apps. They can read your bank balance SMSs that come in, because nothing will stop them from doing that. And also there are also many other smarter ways of how these things can be done. So I mean, we've spoken about Stalkerway, where a person can have an app that reads your messages and sends them to another phone without you even knowing. A person can link your WhatsApp to their WhatsApp mobile device, and in the case of this gentleman, the person simply just gets your email address and your password, and you don't know what to do with that. So the first thing that I just want to highly emphasize is have two-factor authentication in whatever that you do that is of critical importance to you. So your email address, especially if you have Google, have your email address, the password, but also have two-factor authentication that prevents unlawful changing of your password without your knowledge. Apps that perhaps rely on using apps that have self-destructing messages. So in this case, you're talking Snapchat, where a message deletes quickly. You have Telegram also, which does that. You have Signal that encrypts your messages. You have also what you call Wicker as an app. There is BurnChat. So I actually posted on our account an article that speaks about these apps and how you can protect your information. So I just think that to anyone that wants to have an extra layer of information, put that in. And if you can, especially on Android phones, you can even download apps that can add a passcode to your app, even if a person has gained access to it. They might be different to your pattern that you use to unlock your phone.
So yeah, absolutely interesting. So that's a very interesting tech tip. But yeah, rather just don't send 1,000 DMs.
Things can look guilty even when they're innocent, Chief.
Ish. No. Okay.
But yeah, so that was me in closing. So anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that was a great show. I think discussing important things. I think Samsung is going to have a great year. Let's hope the coronavirus can be gotten under control, and let's see what, like you said, big African companies are going to do to follow their international counterparts around climate change,
and keep those phones safe.
Yeah, please. But that's another episode from us. We out, and we'll check you again next week.
Cheers.